السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. Good evening and welcome back to Thrive. The series that's currently underway is Living with Heartfulness, and in these opening sessions we are focusing on all the obstacles that prevent us from living with presence, living from the heart. And for the past few weeks we've been talking about hurry, the haste and the rush with which we live our lives. And so we spoke about it in quite a bit of detail. Today I want to kind of wrap that discussion up and move on to the second obstacle that we could face when trying to live more intentional and present lives, inshallah. So we left off last week talking about some of the ways that we can embrace our finitude, embrace the fact that we are finite beings. And we've been talking about that idea because a big problem with the way we live is sometimes it seems as though we think we have unlimited time in life. Our approach seems to be that I am going to do everything I want in my lifetime, visit all the countries I want to, try all the restaurants, live as healthy a lifestyle as I want. This mentality that I can have it all. And we've been trying to kind of step back and acknowledge that actually that's not true. It's a painful reality. It doesn't sound the most hope-inducing and optimistic, but I feel it'd be better to be in alignment with reality than to live some type of false optimism. I was referencing a book towards the end of last week's session on, it was called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. And the idea is that if someone lives till about 80, essentially in their lifespan, they'll have about 4,000 weeks. And if you reach 20, that's 1,000 weeks already down. And when you think about it in those terms, you realize that, okay, my finitude is actually a very real thing. And for some, that might initially strike as a little bit of a downer, like, oh man, so life's really not that long. But Berkman, the author, Oliver Berkman, he argues that actually, no, it's very empowering. Because once you accept the fact that you can't do everything, it just becomes a question of, so then what will I choose to do? And you can actually begin to focus on prioritizing. Because you don't have a choice. You have to prioritize, given the limited time that you have and the number of things you probably want to do but wouldn't be able to fit in your lifetime anyways. So we talked about deciding in advance what to fail at, celebrating your small victories, and accepting that you can't care about everything. The next point I want to mention, and I'll only mention a few before we move on, inshallah. One of the ways to slow down in our relationships is to adopt a more curious attitude to our relationships as opposed to adopting a very utilitarian or utility-based approach to relationships. A lot of times we approach relationships from a lens of, what can I get out of this? I meet someone, and I'm always calculating, will this person help me get a job? Will this person help me raise money? Will this person help me do this? Will this person help me? And we look at people almost as a means to an end. Why? Because in life, in our heads, we have a lot to get done. So the people around me become tools that I use to get those things done. And Berkman argues that, well, maybe we could start to adopt more of a curious attitude in our relationships, where you're in relationships not for any end goal, but really just approaching people with curiosity to Figure out who this human being in front of me is. And that will force you to slow down. A lot of times we react and we overreact without investigating why someone did what they did and said what they said. Because I don't have time. I don't have time to navigate the specifics of why this person did what they did. They hurt me, cut them off, move on. We got stuff to do, places to be, people to meet. And that becomes our mentality. And that's fueled by this rush, this haste. And so if we step back and say, wait, no, in front of me is a full human being with dreams and aspirations and goals, with their own whole personality and history, let me try to understand them. It does slow you down. It forces you to slow down. An example of this would be if you go to like a grocery store, right? And you see someone behind the counter. That's a whole human being. That's a whole human being. And I don't say that to act like I'm saying something profound. But it's very easy to slip into the mindset of, I have something I need to get done here, which is check this out. They're going to do it for me. I'm going to pay. I'm going to move on. And we don't pay attention to them. We often don't even worry too much about our manners, whether or not we smiled, ask them how they're doing genuinely. Just take an extra 30 seconds to give them a compliment on how you like their Crocs. I don't know how you see their Crocs from where you're standing, but like something, right? And you just make a little, you uplift them because you recognize there's a human standing there. And we don't know what that would do for their day. So to slow down in our relationships is to see people for who they are, full human beings, and not a means to an end. Okay, I want to move on to the next point, which I think is so fascinating coming from someone that's, to my knowledge, not a Muslim. But Berkman notes that, the belief in the hereafter, when a human being believes in a hereafter, it actually helps them slow down. How? So I'm going to read from his book a little passage. He says, as one German sociologist explains, pre-modern people weren't much troubled by such thoughts. What does he mean by such thoughts? The thoughts that I need to accomplish everything in this limited time that I have in my life. I got to make sure I maximize my efficiency and get everything done. He said, pre-modern people really didn't think like that. He said, partly because they believed in an afterlife. There was no particular pressure to get the most out of their limited time. Because as far as they were concerned, it wasn't limited. And in any case, earthly life was but a relatively insignificant prelude to the most important part. It's the idea that, whatever I don't get to do here, I'll just do it in Jannah. Like, I never got to try out alcohol. We'll have it in Jannah. Do you know what I'm saying? Right? You ever seen that skit of that person that's like practicing their orders for Jannah? Anyone seen that one? Something on the rocks. Like, I don't even know what I'm talking about. Like, yeah, something on the rocks, and it's like, I'm just practicing for Jannah, right? Like the idea that whatever I couldn't do here and couldn't enjoy here, I'll get it in paradise. So you don't feel this pressure to get it all done here. I mean, it's profound. The shift in perspective of someone who doesn't see this life to be all that there is. It's like, you take a child to a park. You ever try to get them to leave? You know what I'm talking about? You know how hard that is? And people bribe the kids, you know what I'm talking about? Like, when we get home, I'll give you this, like to get them out of the park. And one of the tricks is what? I'll bring you back tomorrow. So the kid's like, okay, right? Like, this is not the last 5 minutes I have for the next 6 months in this park. I'll come back tomorrow. So then they're ready to give it up, to say, what? I'll be here tomorrow. It's a very similar approach here. Whatever I'm deprived of, seemingly, outwardly in life, in this dunya, we have it in the hereafter. And in fact, the Quran talks about alcohol and wine in paradise being pure. So you don't wake up with a hangover and like regretting what you did last night. This is different, but you'll still get the pleasure. So he says, and this is interesting as well. He said, pre-modern people also tended to see the world as unchanging through history, or in some cultures, as cycling repeatedly through the same predictable stages. It felt like a known quantity. You were content to play your role in the human drama, a role that countless thousands had played before you and thousands more would play after your death, without any sense that you were missing out on the exciting new possibilities of your particular moment in history. But secular modernity changes all that. When people stop believing in an afterlife, everything depends on making the most of this life. And when people start believing in progress, in the idea that history is headed towards an ever more perfect future, they feel far more acutely the pain of their own little lifespan, which condemns them to missing out on almost all of that future. And so they try to quell their anxieties by cramming their lives with experience. Do you get that? And I mentioned this last week, but we can come back to this quote. What modern people lack in depth, they try to make up for in variety. What modern people lack in depth, they try to make up for in variety. I don't have the most meaningful and deep experiences, but I sure have a lot of them. I sure have a lot of them. And I have a camera roll on my phone to as proof. Look at all the countries I've been to. Look at all the places I've seen, the attractions that I've experienced. But how did that shape you and transform you, and how did that impact you? I went to the museum, and what did you walk out with besides pictures? Did it touch your heart? Did it move you? Did you feel a sense of transcendence, standing in the face of beauty? All right? What did you experience? And for us, that's not often even a thought. I just need to add another flag emoji in my Instagram bio to show all the countries I've been to. That's what that is, right? Cramming things. So, for all of these things that I just talked about, both today and last week, it really boils down to making an attempt to realign our lives with our values. So, what does that look like? Perhaps right now, we equate busyness with importance. The busier I am, the more important I am. As though if I'm not doing anything, I'm falling behind. But what if we could shift our perspective and realize that busyness is not the same as purpose? That instead of seeking to be busy, what if I seek to make sure that I do that which aligns with my values? Eliminating hurry and rush from my life means clarifying my yeses and having the courage to say no to everything else. I clarified this last week. I said, my talks, the past few that I've given, and today as well, it's not anti-productivity. Let me make that very clear. But it is against the spirit of doing things in a hasty manner with an anxious energy of, I gotta get everything done. One of the reasons that we do that, as I've talked about, is we're trying to cram too much. because we equate doing a lot with living meaningfully. And the two are not the same. And so you could live a very full life, but it doesn't mean you actually walk away any healthier, any more fulfilled. And you see this, I talked about it I think last week. We do this with our children too. Have you ever seen children who are in like 6 extracurricular activities? After school, they're put right into soccer, and then they go into gymnastics, and they're put into something else, and they come home like 9 p.m. Holy, this little 5-year-olds, they got like a 9 to 5 and a 5 to 9 themselves. It's crazy. But parents feel guilty. No, I have to give my child every experience. They feel guilty that if I don't give them all of that, then I'm depriving them and I'm being a bad parent. No. Definitely give them, those extracurriculars that they love and would like to play. Sure, enroll them. Give them some time for boredom. My children, they know my response now. When they come to me, say, Abu, I'm bored. My daughter, she comes and says it, and she's like, don't say it. She says, Abu, I'm bored, but don't say it. She knows I'm going to say what? Good. When she says to me, I'm bored, I say, good. I want you to be bored. I believe boredom is a beautiful thing. The creativity that it elicits, right? Some of y'all are judging me really hard as a parent, and I can see it in your eyes. You're like, really? No, I really believe boredom is good. Right? Any creativity, the amount of stimulation they can receive otherwise, there's no shortage of that. I believe we struggle with finding times where we can be bored, like where children can be bored, to kind of use their minds to come up with a game. Any of y'all ever come up with games when you were children? You made up some weird game with some socks? No? Like when I was little, we started playing hockey with our hands. And we would use the doors as the nets because we couldn't go outside for whatever reason. So we'd take like a sock, and that would be the puck, and then you just kind of like shoot. This is your hockey stick with your hand. I know it sounds mad ghetto, but like that's how we lived. That's creativity. Today I'm proud of that, You don't find a YouTube tutorial for that, right? Like we made that up. But today, like that's not common. Come up with your own. And so yeah. We need to clarify what we're going to say yes to and be willing to put more energy into it. Like really devote ourselves to things, to become really good at something. And then we have to say no to other things. We have to. We need to maybe shift our perspective from the mentality that I need to fit more in my day to I need to fit more meaning in my day. Time isn't best spent when it's packed. It's best spent when it's meaningful, purposeful, and aligned with our deepest values. And I want to give you an analogy to explain this. Imagine you could sip your coffee or you could chug it. In both cases, you're going to get the caffeine that's in that cup, right? In both cases. But when you chug it, what happens? The rest of the day, your mouth is tender and sore because you burnt your mouth. You frayed your nerves. That's kind of how we rush through life. And yes, maybe we're getting it all done. But we end the day absolutely exhausted. To be honest, hating our life. We love going to sleep and we hate waking up, thinking that, oh my God, I have another day ahead of me. Imagine we already have a limited life and we're spending Mondays absolutely despising everything about it. Allahu Akbar. Because we put this pressure on ourselves to get it all done. And the last point here, maybe we need to shift our mentality from, if I say no, I'll miss out on something important. And shift it to, you know what? by missing out on something, this allows me to go deeper into what truly matters. For those of you who were able to join us at Youth X, you might recall Ustad Abdul Rahman said something really beautiful. He mentioned how he'd been asked to come early on Saturday morning, to fly in on a flight early morning. And he said that he told them he couldn't do that. He said, no, I can only come on a later flight where I land around 4 p.m., 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And then he explained why. He said because his son had a basketball game that morning. And his son really wanted him to be there. Now one might say, but he comes for Youth X once a year. Imagine this is a possible thought process is, hey, Youth X happens once a year. I'm being invited to fly all the way to Canada. I should probably go early to help out and be there and available and, be a part of that conference. It's once a year. My son plays basketball every weekend. But he said no. And as a parent, I know how difficult that is. Because it's very easy to prioritize other things and tell your son or your daughter, no, next time. As though you have an infinite childhood with them. For him to say, no, I can't fly in, I'm sorry guys. I have to be at my son's basketball game. I mean, that speaks a lot to a person's values. So, if, missing out on some things, if I can choose correctly, then when I choose to miss out on some things, it's not just missing out, it actually allows me to go deeper into what truly matters. How many of you have heard of something called slow living? Anyone? Okay, I want to talk a little bit about this concept because it really aligns with what I've been talking about. Slow living is a philosophy that's based off of a 1986 slow food movement founded in Italy. So in Italy in the early days, in the 80s, when there was now the spread of fast food restaurants, many of the local residents started to feel threatened that our culture of eating and to sit and eat peacefully, not fast food, they felt like their culture was at risk. So they countered it with a slow food movement, where we're not looking for fast food. We're going to promote the idea that food is more than just an obstacle in the way to get it out of the way and keep going on with your productivity. No, food is something that brings humans together. And we need to sit and savor that food and those moments spent over food. Based on that philosophy, there's this movement that you can look into. It's called the slow living movement. And again, one might think, whoa, slow living? What do you want me to do, drive the speed limit? Slow living, that's going to make me very non-productive. Because we seem to equate haste and rush with productivity. And maybe quantitatively that's true maybe. But what about your quality of your life? What about the quality of your life? And I think that's a major concern that we all have, is we're going through movements on a daily basis. We've jumped through all the hoops that society asked us to go through. Yet something within us just feels so deficient and missing. And burnout's very common. Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking about capitalism. Capitalism forcing us to have a tasty lifestyle. So a lot of people control their time. So everything is rushed. People are eating while they're working and just moving, and they're trying to finish this because capitalism is forcing them to have this tasty lifestyle. So how do you combat that when you live in the West, that's a very capitalistic society? You see the Eastern world, they're more slowly family oriented, collectivism, while we have so much individualism and fast-paced lifestyle.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. We feel very pressured by capitalism and its demands of us to keep rushing and keep, meeting the standards and being more productive and efficient. Absolutely. What the slow living movement really calls for, however, is being able to slow down. Why? Because you just reduce the number of things that you're doing. It's very much in line with what we were talking about earlier. That you don't sign up for every single, opportunity that people send you. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, imagine you began to choose. Imagine we were picky with our social media apps the way we're picky with food. Where we didn't just choose it, because everyone does. When it comes to food, we test it out. Do I like this? Does this align with my diet? Like the lifestyle I'm trying to live, the foods I'm trying to eat? Does this align? And if not, I don't care how many people are drinking matcha. I'm not going to drink matcha. Do you get it? Like, it doesn't matter how many people. I would not do it. So we're picky about food. But when it comes to things like social media apps, or even apps in general, we just download. What do you want to accomplish through it? There's no filtering process of whether or not you actually want to use that. Someone sends you a link, and you're available that weekend. Well, I guess I'll go. Wait, hold on. Before you say yes, could you have filled that weekend with something else? More meaningful, maybe? We should be people that we're extremely, extremely careful with our commitments. That we're not just signing up for things left, right, and center, driven by that, FOMO. No, so slow living says, start to really reduce the number of things you do, so that whatever you do choose to do, you can do it, with your whole being. You can actually be there. You can be in that conversation. It's not a 30-minute convo where have you typed up your life updates? Because I have typed up mine so we can be efficient. Holy, what is happening here? Do you get what I'm saying? Now, I'm not against people typing up life updates, okay? My point is you get there for efficiency, okay, so let me share with you, here's my updates. What are your updates? Okay, fine. Yeah, and did it. And we're done. 30 minutes, gotta go. Gotta be somewhere else. And then, you know what, guys? I don't know why I feel so lonely and disconnected. Yeah, because every social interaction you have is a meeting. Like, it's not a hangout. It's not a connection. It's just it could have been an email. The way it was structured, the way that it ran. And so, slow living says, wait, step back. And savor the moments that you have doing the things that are meaningful to you. And I think that's just so important. Even sometimes we optimize our rest. We feel like we have to justify our rest. Let me read a quote here I came across. Because you keep hearing people arguing that more time off might be good for the economy. You ever heard that argument? Well, if we give people, if it's a 4-day work, a 4-day work week, it's actually more efficient for the economy, it's better for the economy. And the author writes, but wait. Why should we have to justify life in terms of the economy? Does everything in life revolve around an economy? It feels like it sometimes, I know. But this is where now a lot of people who adopt the philosophy of slow living, they also, side by side, without even often intending, adopt a philosophy of minimalism. Because they realize that, wait, if I'm going to do less, I'm going to require less. If you're not attending every single wedding and the 5-6 functions that each of them has, we need to have a conversation about this as a Muslim community. It's out of hand. Right? It's subhanAllah. How much choreography can you do? I'm just joking. If you don't have to go to all of them, then you don't have to buy new dresses for every single one of them. And if you don't have to buy all that, then you're not constantly pinched for money. Do you understand what I'm saying? And you start to really realize, wait, all the pressure to earn all that money to live a certain lifestyle is no longer the same. So let's say you continue to earn that money. You can actually put it towards more meaningful things. You can do things that truly matter to you. And so that's essentially the philosophy there. One author writes, most people feel their true selves exist only outside of work, which means they're only themselves for a tiny portion of their lives. That's a scary thought. We see work as an obstacle, and then I have my life. Right? I mean, that's troubling. That's troubling that we haven't learned to, be present in the work that we do. We talked a lot about this last week. Okay, I want to switch to the next obstacle. This next obstacle is actually closely related to what we've been talking about, which is hurry. But the next obstacle is distraction. And I want to challenge our understanding of distraction here. If we want to understand what distraction is, it might help to understand what it's not. What's the opposite of distraction? I heard focus, presence, concentration. People sometimes say attention. And I would argue that no, none of these are the opposite of distraction. Yeah. Sorry, I can't hear you. Aware? To be aware? Yeah, I mean, that's, again, a notion. Preoccupation, sure. Presence. Devotion, okay. The opposite, if you look at it linguistically, is traction. The opposite of distraction is traction. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you go to the Latin roots, traction means to pull. And distraction means to pull you away from. And so you want to pause for a moment. Because let's say you're sitting and you're meant to be doing work on your laptop, right? For whatever reason. But instead you pull out your phone. And now you're on your phone. Are you distracted? A lot of us might say, yes, I'm distracted. And we can agree with that. But if you're distracted, it means you can't be focused. But you're absolutely focused on your phone. The opposite of distraction is not focus.
You're not focusing on what matters.
So that's a different point, right? Because that's not a matter of focus anymore. And I'll give you some examples here. Imagine you're at the gym, okay? You walk in with the intention of what? I'm going to work out, get stronger, healthier. That's your goal. So one approach of an individual is to go in and get on the treadmill or start lifting. That's considered traction. The goal was to work out. This individual has walked in and is fulfilling that goal. Their actions are pulling them towards their goal. That's traction. But imagine the person sits down on the workout bench and pulls out their phone and then starts watching fitness videos, scrolling through motivational videos, sending texts, right? Anything but working out. That's distraction. This individual might be focused on the phone and actually actively scrolling and, they're locked in on the phone. But it's distraction because they're actually pulled away from their original goal. You're using your energy, but it's not aligned with what your initial goal is. And so that's really what it comes down to. Traction is being aligned with your goal. And distraction is anything that leads to you being misaligned from your goal. As a parent, it's very common, right? Your goal is to spend time with your children. Traction would be that you actually sit, you look at them, you're there, you're talking to them, playing with them, coloring with them, actively engaged. That's traction, because you set out to do it, and that's literally what you're doing. Distraction would be what? To be on your phone, watching parenting content. All right? Like, hey, I'm still learning about parenting, but that was not the goal. The goal was to be with your child. So you're distracted. You're away from what you were intending to do. Does this make sense? It's an important distinction so that we can really understand what we're talking about. What the examples I gave were like everyday tasks, going to work out, being with your child. I want to start by talking about a deeper and more encompassing form of distraction that we could experience, and that's existential distraction. Existential distraction. Anyone know what I'm talking about here? Yeah, go ahead. Beautiful. Absolutely. Absolutely. We have lost sight of an overarching sense of direction with our lives. The larger picture and goal of life is missing. Like we don't even pause to consider it. There's a word for this in Arabic. Anyone know? Anyone know what the word is? It starts with ghain. Ghafla. Right? Ghafla. Some of the scholars define ghafla as فقد الشعور بما حقه أن يشعر به. That ghafla is to lose awareness of that which a person is meant to existentially be aware of. And so if your overall life is existentially distracted, it's no wonder then that within your life, the different instances and moments you have, you're probably quite distracted. Because if you don't have an overall goal of where you want to go, then the micro behaviors that are meant to get you there will probably be totally off as well. Because you don't have an overarching goal. You're not really sure where it's all meant to take you. And you can't judge the value of any one decision. Should I do this? Yes or no? Well, anything that could make sense to you, sure, let's do it. It's not a bad thing. But wait, does it get you to where you want to go? And if you don't have any idea of where you're trying to go, right? You have no idea where you're trying to go, then any path can get you there. You get that? So, I want to talk about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks in the Quran. Before I get into the specifics of daily distraction, I want to talk a little bit about existential distraction. Allah Ta'ala in Surah Al-A'raf, the 7th chapter, verse 179, it's a very powerful verse where He speaks about the difference between human beings and animals. He says, وَلَقَدْ ذَرَأْنَا لِجَهَنَّمَ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ. Allah Ta'ala says, we have destined for many jinn and human beings the hellfire. Why? Why would these human beings go to the hellfire? Allah mentions, لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. Allah says, they have hearts, but they don't use their hearts to truly understand. Allah says, they have eyes, but they don't use their eyes to see the truth. And they have ears, but they don't use their ears to listen to the truth. So what does Allah say? They're like animals. Then Allah says, wait, bal, rather, they're even more astray, less guided than animals. Then Allah says, such people are entirely heedless. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ. These people are completely heedless. Let's pause. Let's think about animals. You ever notice how alert animals are? The purpose of an animal's life is what? It's just to stay alive, right? And then their daily function is to find some food, right? Have a good time, avoid predators, and produce offspring. That's an animal's life. You ever seen a rabbit in your backyard? Dude's chilling, man. He's just back there hopping around looking for carrots. That's called the life. But they're very alert. Very alert. You touch your door and start to open it a little bit, and ears perk up, and the eyes start to dart around. They're aware. Animals are not ghafil. They're not heedless. They're not distracted. They're listening, right? They're constantly scanning their environment. They feel threatened. The only animals that can relax a bit more are domesticated animals. Because the walls of the house and the people within the house have convinced the animal that they're safe. Right? So the animal is not as alert. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about human beings. The human beings don't go through life often alert. They're just very heedless. Heedless of what? What's there to be worried about? You might be like, yo, I got alarms on my car, alarms on my house, we're good. I feel pretty safe. That's not what we're talking about. I talked to someone recently. They had a major accident, required big surgeries. And they said, since that day, every day I wake up so grateful for life and just trying my best to prepare for ultimately the day when I leave. That's a perspective, a mentality. Why do you think they're doing that? It's like they realized how fragile life is. Y'all know what I'm talking about? When something happens to you in life or to someone close to you, dear to you, and just reminds you how fragile life is, you don't feel so what? So secure. Because in our heads, we're going to live how long? 70, 80, 90 years from now? That's how we hope, we think, we wish, and we almost kind of expect it. Until something comes along and says, that's why people make drastic life changes. You ever seen that? The doctor gives them a diagnosis. If you keep going this way, this is going to happen to you. Oh, wow. So I won't live as long as I thought. Oh, no. Now they're alert. Now they're paying attention to everything they eat. Someone brings them, is there sugar in there? Right? Now they're paying attention. Right? Before that, they would never ask that question. They would never check the calories. Because there was this security, this safety. Right? I'm good. I have nothing to worry about. My health is not in danger. The moment you feel in danger, you start to scan, you start to ask questions. Wait, what's this? What about that? What about our lives? Do we ask questions? What should I do with my time? How should I spend my time? How much time should I devote to my own education and learning what it means to be a good human being and how to be a good human being? And not just what am I becoming, but who am I becoming? What does it mean to regulate one's emotions? What does it mean to address one's insecurities and biases? What does it mean to face one's shadow? What does it mean to learn how to be a good parent? These are deep, deep questions. There's a lot to learn. And there's limited time. All right? There's a story about a man who came to one of the righteous and said, Shaykh, I just got married. Can you give me some advice on how to be a good spouse? He said, you're too late. He said, you're too late. The work of becoming a good spouse starts long before you get married. Because otherwise you bring all your flaws into marriage. And then the other person can easily become collateral damage to your healing. And hopefully it's not so much damage that it falls apart. The point I'm not trying to scare nobody, but to say that you do want to recognize that the work starts today, whatever that is. But we can be ghafil of that, heedless, because we don't feel like any urgency. Do you know what I'm saying? The Quran repeatedly talks about this, by the way. فَلَا يَأْمَنُ مَكْرَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. What would happen, and I often think about this, any of y'all ever reflect on living in Florida? Huh? Right? When you're shoveling your snow, don't you think about Florida? But then you have to tell yourself what? We don't have alligators, we don't have floods, we don't have tornadoes, right? And that's how you keep shoveling. No, but my point is what? Imagine living in a country or in a state or city where you're constantly worried about when's the next tornado going to come? How do you establish yourself in that city? And we seem, I remember last year, do y'all remember when there was a warning about a tornado? Did you guys see that? No? Okay, maybe it wasn't like Mississauga or something. I know in Cambridge it was like, take shelter. I was like, where? I started thinking, I'm like, where am I supposed to take shelter? I never thought about this. Because we're just like, we're good. We don't think about it. But if you go out there, most people there will have some plan. They'll have stocked up certain things. I'm assuming, by the way. All right, we might actually go and find out that no, they're just as heedless as us, maybe. But we would expect that what? Knowing the frequency of tornadoes, that they wouldn't feel so safe. Do you get what I'm saying? And so, it's important for us to realize how fragile life is, so that we don't lose sight of what's important to do in the time that we have. I know someone who recently lost a close friend, and they gave the classic advice that we've heard, many of us have heard, but you don't realize how valuable that advice is until something like that happens. What do they say? Guys, make sure you're really nice and you apologize and you speak kindly to each other, because you never know when the last time you speak to someone is. Now, we've all heard that. We've heard that at some point, right? But none of us really think about it, right? We won't think about it. Only when you lose someone, you're like, man, what was the last thing I said to them? I can't believe I told them that their Crocs looked ugly. Astaghfirullah. Like, that's the last thing. Right? They went to the grave with that memory of me. How do we remember the last? But it's this understanding that life is fragile. And when you do that, you start to really ask yourself, what's important and how do I want to live? So Allah Ta'ala says human beings are actually more astray than animals. Why? Not only because animals are literally doing what they're created for, whereas a human being who just eats, drinks food, like drinks beverages, produces offspring, children, and just has a good time. Not just because that person's, such a human being is not fulfilling their purpose, but even deeper. At least animals go through their lives alert. And humans go through their lives, many of them, completely asleep. Spiritually speaking, completely asleep. And maybe some of us can attest to that. We're like, man, a few years ago, I had no idea where I was going with my life. Like, I was a mess. I had no idea what I was doing. And you're grateful that, alhamdulillah, today you kind of found some sense of a direction. You've kind of started to set out on that path. But subhanAllah, Allah says that, a human being that doesn't use their mind to reflect on the fragility of life and to see around them that tomorrow we're going to have 2 janazas here at Isna. There's 2 bodies right now being washed. And it's like every day here. When people lose loved ones, it's just such a deep reminder of just how fragile life is, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he told us in a hadith, and it's a really profound hadith, where he drew a square on the sand, like visual aids, right? Like in the sand, he drew a square. And then he drew a line which started from one end of the square, went all the way through, and then came out the other side of the square. And then across the middle line, across that line, just there were some lines, shorter lines coming, perpendicular to that line that was going outside. He said, this line is man. And the square is death. And these middle lines are all of the hopes and the small lines are all the troubles and difficulties you go through, but this one middle line that starts from one end and goes all the way to the other and goes through it, he said that is a human being's hopes. Almost all of us will go into our graves with, 100 insha'Allahs of things we wish we could do and we hope to do, but we wouldn't get tawfiq to. And so it becomes a question of, how do I try to make sure that when that time comes, at least the most important things to me in my life, I haven't missed out on them. So I want to investigate, why is it that we are distracted? More not so much at an existential level, because that requires deep reflection over death, over the fragility of life, over the realization that I don't have forever. It kind of dovetails with what I talked about earlier regarding the human being's finitude and finite lifespan. But on a daily basis, why do you think we're distracted from the things that we want to do? What are some reasons you think we're distracted? Yeah. Overstimulation. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely a trigger. Self-sabotage and the fear of failing. Can you tell me more about that? What that looks like?
Again, in the context of school, if I don't do well on this exam, it's because I didn't study hard enough. And so you kind of create a self-fulfilling prophecy where you won't study so that you have a quote-unquote excuse to not do well.
Mm.
Worked really hard and still didn't do well. It would be a lot more.
That's real. That's real. In other scenarios, we don't even try because you can't fail if you don't try, right? But what you're describing is you don't try so that you have an excuse. When you do end up not doing well, you can blame it on, I didn't try. And if I had tried, I probably could have done really well. So it's almost like keeping up this, image in your own head of how competent you are, right? Because what happens when you put all your effort in and you still don't do good? Then you have to be like, now what? Now what's the reason, right? So you just kind of self-sabotage. Beautiful. I want to talk about two possible triggers here. And then I want to investigate more internal triggers because I think that's psychologically more at the root of it. There are external triggers that can tempt us away from our goals and objectives. The most common one is technology, isn't it? We like to blame the phone. We like to blame the different apps or the notifications we get on, for email or something. It could be friends. Friends could be a distraction. They're sitting around you and they're just keeping you away from what you're meant to be doing. These are all possibilities external to you. They're the reason why you're not able to get what you're trying to get done. And here, one author, he divides people into two main camps. He said you have blamers and shamers. He goes, the blamers, they say, you know what? I am not able to do what I want in life because of the internet, because of the apps, social media, right? The modern world is really just keeping me back. It's so difficult. Essentially not my fault. Right? It's just the world around me that's just so engaging and distracting. And then you have the shamers, and many of us might engage in this as well, where we're just man, I have such poor discipline and willpower. I have an addictive personality, man. I probably have a short attention span. There's probably something wrong with me. I should probably go see a psychologist. I just can't focus. Right? And it's almost like we believe we're broken. Blamers and shamers. But let's think about, example, eating. A lot of times we eat when we don't want to eat, or we feel we shouldn't eat. And we have to kind of wrap our heads around, why is it that I am eating far beyond what I would like to eat, the amount? What's the reason? So I could blame, the food is so good. Nowadays, industries, they calculate how much sugar to put in the sweet spot of how much sugar. So it's just very addictive. That's blaming. Shaming is just, I have poor willpower, and I'm just not a very health-conscious person. And you just kind of shame yourself. Look, food is made to be delicious. That's the goal. Technology is designed to be engaging. But what really matters is your response to those urges. This is where we now turn to internal triggers. And we could talk about what's called the homeostatic response. As human beings, we're extremely sensitive to discomfort. One of our primary goals is to remove discomfort. If my body starts to heat up, it gets uncomfortable, so then to kind of balance out the temperature, the core temperature, you sweat. It's a mechanism to return the body to equilibrium in terms of temperature. Now, what does it have to do with what we're talking about? Anytime you sit down to do something that's important and a little bit cognitively burdensome, there's going to be negative feelings. Every single time. It's very rare that you will sit down and look forward to writing an assignment. And to note that feeling in the moment. What do you feel? What do you experience? You've blocked off. People try to solve things through schedules, right? I have exams coming up, so I made a schedule for how I'm going to prepare for that exam. I'm going to study this time, study at that time, eat this time, work out that time. Got a whole schedule. I'm feeling really good. And what happens in that first study schedule slot? What happens? You sit down, and it's like an itching feeling, right? Like you just, okay, I need to open up, the university library and start searching through I do a literature review, right? Oh no, who wants to do that? Oh, there's going to be so much to look through. And what if I don't find what I'm looking for? And if your phone's not on silent, you get a bzz, bzz, so you pull it out, right? It's not that this distracts you, because it's designed to do that, to give you notifications. It's that you yourself are seeking an escape from what's in front of you. Because you're bored, or you feel overwhelmed, anxious about how you're going to actually get the work done. It feels like too much. Or if you try to stay focused mentally for longer than 5 minutes, it feels tiring. So to break the monotony, because we're not used to it, it's a negative feeling. So the homeostatic response is to look for something to give us that positive kind of like stimulation. Check my phone. Now, because I want to make the argument that it's not just about a phone. Let's say you give your phone to someone. You lock yourself up in some room. It's just you, there's a desk, there's a chair, maybe there's a bed. Suddenly, cleaning your room becomes mad fascinating. No, real. Right? You're sitting down, you open up the website, and you're like, my mom's right. I should clean the room, right? Like, now your mom's right. The last 3 weeks, she was not right. But as soon as you sat down, yes, birrul walidain. And we stand up and we start cleaning the room. Yeah. It's a coping mechanism. We don't know how to tolerate the discomfort of our own negative emotions. In the words of one author, he says, time management is essentially pain management. You want to make sure you stay on schedule? Learn to tolerate the discomfort of doing so. And you can do it. And people can do it. You can get used to doing these things. It's just a matter of being aware of it and recognizing what the tendency is and resisting the urge, the powerful urge to disconnect from what you're meant to be doing to go do something else. And it can start off in really subtle ways. One of the most common things to do is what? When you sit down to get work done, let me check my email, right? It's like low-hanging fruit. Let me check my email. But then you get caught up in your email and you never get to your work. It's like, no, focus on what needs to get done. We'll stop here, inshallah. There's a little bit more I want to talk about. But I do think it's important for us to really understand what's going on, the underpinnings of why we get pulled away from what we really want to get done, and instead we focus on something else, which is literally what distraction is. It's not because this thing out here pulls me. Because if you don't have your phone, you'll find something else. And we can all remember this, no? If you don't have your phone, you'll find something else to keep you focused, anything to keep you away from your actual work. And that's what shaitan does to you in prayer. You know, when you stand up to pray, the Prophet ﷺ taught us, shaitan comes to you and says, hey, remember you have to do this. He says in the hadith, he comes to you, if you're wondering why you remember all the things you remember in prayer, it's because shaitan comes and reminds you. Now, remembering stuff you need to get done is not a bad thing, is it? You should remember the stuff you need to get done. But in prayer, then it's distraction. It's distraction. And that's the issue. So, we're not able to be present and live from the heart in life if we're constantly distracted. And we're distracted when we flee from any negative emotions we might experience when we're doing something. You know, another factor before we all say, you know what, I'm actually a pretty good Muslim, it's just shaitan that comes to me in prayer, not my fault. No, another factor is we get bored. You know, in Dhuhr, when the Imam's not reading out loud, we just get bored. And we look out the window, we're like, what's happening across the street? All right, over here. Or you start looking around the hall, oh, I love that dome. You know, should I do my nikah in Isna? Maybe I should. You know, and you start like just thinking about things. Right, it's bored. You see now why I tell my children it's good to be bored? See that? That was a good one. You didn't see that coming, right? That's full circle, guys. We're going to wrap it up right there because, you know, it doesn't get better than that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the understanding of the experiences that we have so that we can really truly live a life of meaning and purpose, so that when we reach the end of our lives, Allah is pleased with us and we're ready to face Him. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khair to all of you. Any thoughts and reflections? I do want to hear from you guys on what we talked about. Yes, please, go ahead. What's my recommendation on sitting with discomfort? So, if you come next week to Thrive, you'll hear about it, inshallah. I had to leave a cliffhanger. There has to be a cliffhanger, right? Inshallah. So I do intend on talking about it more, inshallah. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've learned from somewhere was the task you're trying to do is seem overwhelming, break it down.
Mm-hmm.
And for the given kind of sitting, just don't think of the big task, but the broken task. Like, I'm only going to do like this. For example, in the example you gave was literature review. I'm not going to review everything. I'm just going to at least list the items that I want to review.
Right.
It makes it kind of doable.
Yeah.
So the pain kind of lessens and the higher probability that you can get it done.
Great. Did you hear that? There you go. That's your answer. It's done. You were distracted from the answer? I'm joking. No, he was talking about breaking it down into smaller tasks, right? So you don't have to, and it's true though, when you sit down and you think about the whole thing, it is overwhelming. And a lot of us do that with our lives, by the way. A lot of us, we're thinking about like 10 years from now. Just hold up, right? Here's my question. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, imagine you instead thought, what can I do today, Tuesday, to make this a more meaningful and aligned with my values day than yesterday? What's one thing I could do? And you could probably find something. Go for a walk. Just add that into your schedule. Go for a walk. Spend 10 minutes listening to some Quran. Just sit down and eat food and don't touch anything. You know, how many of you had parents that would not let you read or watch anything while eating food? Anyone? My mother is very particular about this. The way she gets so upset with me, you know, that don't do that. And subhanAllah, you know, it's real. How can you enjoy the food if you're not even thinking about it, right? And my mother used to say it's just a lack of ingratitude for the blessing. You know, you're not focused on it, you're not digesting it, you're not chewing it properly, your mind's totally somewhere else. So just learning to slow stuff down a little bit. Anyone else want to share? Yeah, go ahead.
I liked how slow living kind of wraps into what you were mentioning afterwards about like tackling these tasks one on one and not like letting distractions take over, because you would think that like when you're not trying to like be distracted, it's like you're tackling every single task and you have to get more done throughout the day. But when you're actually slow living, you're focusing on one task, even if it's like uncomfortable, but it gets you to get through that, and you can finish this one purposeful thing, as opposed to just doing all these other things, cleaning your room and all these things that fill your day, but it's not the purposeful slow living.
Right, 100%. I think it's a matter of trying to bring back quality into our lives when they've been dominated by quantity. Right? It's dominated by quantity. And slow living helps with that. You know, like an even simpler tip would be to slow down talking. Any of y'all find yourselves talking really fast? Like you feel like you have a lot to say? Well, sure, but to slow it down a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
I can't listen to a lecture that's less than 2 times speed right now.
Oh, so like, I'm not even close. Huh. Subhanallah, yeah. It's become a thing now. We even do that with like, people send like voice notes. And WhatsApp's like, you know, we gotta create like 2 times speed. All right? So, but I mean, some people do send podcasts. So I appreciate the 2 times speed from time to time, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Anyone else want to share reflections, thoughts?
I guess in regards to improving our deen and adding good deeds or good habits Islamically, is there wisdom in slowing things down?
Yeah. Scholars talk about this. They say, is it better to just read a lot of Quran with just no reflection because you're just flying through it, or slow down, read less, but really reflect on it? And there's a virtue to reading a lot. So if you can, you combine. You have your portion that you read a lot, like 20 minutes of reading like half juz. But then you could take out another 10 minutes, and that portion you slow it down. Read 1 verse, 2 verses, and just think about it. What is Allah saying to me? Because it's in those slow moments, focused on quality and depth, that the soul is nourished. And in speeding through things, you get to check off the list. That's what you get. Yeah, go ahead. I think some people are thinking like, I could prove you wrong, but yeah, go ahead. SubhanAllah. Yeah. Shaitan doesn't come to an empty house, right? He goes where there's iman. Absolutely. Jazakallah khair. I feel better now, with my prayer, All right, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair to everybody. We will see you inshallah next week. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.